So, a very good evening to everyone from my side of the world, and good afternoon to people from your side of the world. We have today with us a very dynamic woman leader who is working at the intersection of technology and sustainability. She has worked extensively in manufacturing industry of digital products, and she's also the member of Sirpas, and presently she is leading Deepa, which is a consulting firm focused to integrate AI, digital technologies, and in the sustainability movement to accelerate the impact. Warm welcome, Marian. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So, as a founder of Deepa, your strategic advisory focuses on digital innovation for sustainability. What inspired you to launch the venture, and how do you envision its role in accelerate circular economy?
Well, as you said, I have been working for a long time, over more than a decade now, in the manufacturing environment, and I work mainly for large organizations. So I have been in this complexity of navigating the large organization, also the different department structure, and let's say the gap that I identified with the time between the ambitions of large companies and actually the operational feasibility of sustainability actions. So the idea for me of Deepa was to change a little bit my perspective, and after so long with these large organizations, go more on the, let's say, the speedboats. You know, we call these big organization the bigger ships, and we used to have more collaboration with startups that we used to call speedboats. So I wanted to try to have some coming years, let's say, in a more proactive way. And this is why I decided, as you mentioned, to launch my own advisory firm. And as my passion and my purpose is focusing 100% on sustainability, I decided to continue that exercise, working, as you mentioned, more on the regulation side, so trying to be with this more proactive side of the actors, working with a lot of future companies. You mentioned Sirpas, so we have here a lot of future DPP providers, digital product passport providers, ESG reporting providers, and I position Deepa still in what I used to do before. So thinking that sustainability should not be only, a compliance ticking the box exercise, but should be at the heart, at the purpose of an organization. And this is where I think consulting advisory has a big role to play, to work with the organizations, large organizations, but also small SMEs, to support them to get this ESG, sustainability, circularity mindset at the heart of their companies.
That's very interesting. Now, as you're the member of Simpras, I wanted to understand more on the European Union's ESPR working plan, 2025 to 2030. It sets transformational requirements like a mandatory digital product passport. Would you like to share a little bit more on this and how it impacts business?
Yeah, I think the first piece of services, or the first step that Deepa provides, is actually this awareness or information on with what should I start. As you say, it's extremely complex. We have a lot of regulations coming out, ESPR being one. And the intent of a company like Deepa is to help getting a preparedness and an awareness of what is important for my organization, because it's extremely complex. As you know, ESPR and the digital product passports is something generic, but depending on your industry and your products, you will have different delegated acts. That means different timelines, different data points that you will need. So there's a very complex landscape of regulation that we need to navigate through. So this is the first service of DIPA, is getting aware and help them prepare with a focus, as you mentioned, on the digital product passport. And then, which is the second step, but can also be something that is a separate service, is that going back to the purpose, once you know what will be your compliance requirements, do you want to maybe have a little bit more forward-thinking sustainability strategy? So we help also really to define the sustainability objectives and core purpose of the companies. The circularity comes also with the sustainability strategy as one of the pillars, with working with the organization on their circular business models. And then with my background, I started my career in marketing and communications. So there's also something very important to translate these strategies and these impactful efforts that organizations do today into a storytelling and a narrative that is credible, because I assume you have heard a lot about greenwashing. So the idea of having a real and fact-based storytelling and narrative is one thing that we also provide.
So what is a digital product passport? What would you mean by that?
So the DPP, let me call it the DPP for sake of time, is exactly like a human passport for people who never heard about that. It's simply the idea that when you were born, you got a passport, and the questioning of a product having the same. So it's an idea to take responsibility and to enable initially circularity. So we know that we have finite materials on this planet, and the idea is to not lose them and to take them back. So a passport is simply data points set, and the idea is that it's not static, it's something that will evolve and follow the product in a digital way. And the idea is that once the product is going to the consumer, you can continue to track and to understand the life of your product. So the product passports, as when you go through the gate phase of your life, if you travel, you show your passport, the same will go with the product. The passport will be given to different stakeholders. And for instance, as a consumer, you can check what was the path of my product, meaning the materials of the product, how it will produce, the emissions of the product. And the idea is that the data will not only be the path of the product, but also give you indication how to maintain the product, how to potentially expand the life of the product. And once the product is not useful for you anymore, how do you dispose? Where do you bring the product so he can continue his life cycle?
No, it's a very great initiative. I would like to understand which are the, I know it's a little of the questions that we discussed, but which are the companies which are really adopting something like this? Any big retail names that are working on this?
So this will become mandatory in 2027. Starting, you might have heard on the batteries. So the batteries have been the first DPP product category. But with CIRPAS, we're working on the next product category. So you will have, as you mentioned, textile. So the fashion industry is heavily testing this. You will have also the tires. So automotive industry in general is also starting to work on it. One very interesting industry and very complex will be electronics. Because electronics, as you know, we buy a lot of smartphones and they just disappear somewhere, and they are very complex to reuse because of the dismantling and the reusing of the small part on PCBs. So I cannot give you names, but let's say that the big players in these industries, they are actually heavily working together to prepare us then for the regulation coming in the EU.
It's a very great initiative. I must commend you to being part of this. It's a revolution, Not every place has it, so I'm so glad that it's happening there. So in your recent work, in your recent World ESG and Climate Summit presentation that you made, You emphasized moving ESG from reporting to real impact through digital tools, what you're doing right now. Now, can you share a standout example where you all have actually enabled transparency or traceability in the value chain?
Yeah, I mean, I have multiple example in mind, but as we say, I mean, the first support that we're giving is to identify which data do we need to report on. And if you, in your example, we can take the supply chain, so mapping the suppliers. And depending on your industry and your product, you will have to understand what data do I need from these suppliers, because depending on the product, this is changing. And the data identification is just the first step, because now we need to understand what is the best system, and here digitalization is key, to get the data collection and the usage of the data, because ideally you are collecting the data to then do a plan, for instance, for decarbonization. So you have to have an effect after the collection, working with your suppliers hand in hand to have less and less impact during the year. So it's a very complex system that starts with the identification, the collection, and then putting in place a strategy for having a positive impact on, in that case, the example of supply chain. Another thing that comes quickly to mind also is life cycle assessments. So the life cycle assessment is something that is already done by a lot of companies. It's basically the calculation. So it's not like the DPP, a live passport, but it's afterwards getting all the data points from a product to estimate the impact of the product. So making an assessment of the life cycle of a product. And when we help organizations to do that, it's giving, as you say, a lot of understanding of their impact and what they can improve. And this is a simple way to enable transparency and traceability. And the idea with DIPA is to provide generic courses or training about what is a DPP, like you asked me, or what is an SCA, or to give also, depending of the audience, if it's a specific company, what is an SCA or what is a DPP for your company exactly in your situation, which is more targeted.
Excellent. It's a great example. Thank you for sharing this. Now, it adds a huge value to all the work that we are doing and we are teaching. Now, as a female leader scaling a sustainability consulting, what unique barriers did you face as a woman entrepreneur, and what strategies helped you overcome them? So is your company, do you all have like a digital product, or it's primarily more on the intellectual consulting aspects?
So for DIPA, it's clearly simply an intellectual aspect. So it's pure advisory. And also one thing that for me is extremely key is to keep neutrality. So none of the work will be on recommendation of a DPP provider or a reporting tool. Why? Because in that case, it would be for me like working again for a company where you can express your opinion, but you are selling somehow your company, right? In that case, I don't want, or at least this was the purpose I wanted to have with DIPA, is to be a kind of neutral expert. And what I'm sharing with you is what I truly believe should be the right thing. And the same thing we do with customers is what we truly believe is the best solution for you. Now, I will not push you to take this or this solution, because that would impact potentially my recommendation. So that answers your question for what DIPA does exactly. But I want just to jump in on what you mentioned with being a female leader, just because this is, of course, something very deep in my heart, which is a second career, let's say, goal that I have. I have been more than 15 years in the manufacturing industry, and as a woman, it hasn't been easy. And I'm really, let's say, believing and trying to speak up for diversity. Why? Because it's not about being an entrepreneur or woman. It's about having the right to be different. I believe in something that doesn't have to fit in a specific aesthetic, a specific age, a specific gender to fit in the leadership box, which unfortunately I have seen a lot over the years. So that was a small comment that is important for me.
Oh, I do rhyme with you on the same, so I appreciate your views on that. Now, women entrepreneurship is essential for inclusive sustainability, as you've rightly mentioned. How do you think corporate and policy ecosystems can be reimagined to better support women founders in the ESG landscape? Especially in the in the European region, we've seen more women leaders out there vis-a-vis the other parts. But I would like to understand what are the difficulties that you all still do face, and how do you all overcome them?
That's I think a complex question because I don't know if let's say legally or policy could support any of that. I think it's more about getting more role models and more this diversity as a normality. I think that giving visibility, like what you're doing now, to female leaders, to female entrepreneurs, trying to get this networking, this mentorship, I think it's always something positive. And maybe when you mention policy, maybe there should be some sponsorship programs or some funding for women-led companies, ESG ventures. But in the end, I think it's more a societal question. And for me, it's simply to really try to do my part of the exercise of being a role model for others and trying simply to prove point by fact that diversity can be indeed a strategic advantage.
Yeah, definitely. I concur. Now at DEPA, you're actively engaged with industry bodies like GS1 to standardize sustainability protocols. What's the most exciting collaboration you've been involved in right now, and what impact could it have on global supply chains?
So in general, I think collaboration is key, especially for these future type of topics, because we are creating all together something that doesn't exist yet in the example of the DPP. So a DPP is a very complex system, and this system has to be interoperable, and the interoperability meaning that depending where in the world, with what technology, with what requirements, you are supposed to be able all to agree on on opening the passport in a similar way. That means where's the data stored, what is the carrier. So this interoperability for me goes hand in hand with being open for collaboration, partnership, and all this discussion. And this is to answer your question on the standards. That's essential, especially, and I don't know if you feel the same, that in the ESG landscape, with all the goodwill that people like us are trying to advance on this topic, the risk is that we become a little bit complex. If you go in ESG reporting, we have now a lot of standards, ESG rating that are very hard to simply align, So I think that the standardization, interoperability, alignment questions are extremely key, and stakeholders should get involved in that. And you mentioned also partnerships for DEPA. So egoistically, I can mention yesterday, actually, we announced a partnership with the Sustainability Manufacturing Expo. I would say the leading event for sustainable manufacturing in the US. And this type of, for me, of partnership are really interesting and make a lot of sense because it gives directly access to the manufacturing leaders in an event like that with advisory and consulting like DEPA as an example to try to really have directly the discussion of what can we do now, and as you say, not do something that is a theoretical or simply a marketing exercise, but really work with them on something concrete. And a side note, I'm also thinking that in addition to the partnership that we are trying to push with DIPA, it's also about, as said, awareness, doing this type of discussion like with you, trying to get more of this content in education formats. I do also a lot of content creation, like articles. And I'm also releasing, hopefully this year, a book on DPP. So that's also something in terms of awareness, is not only to have business meetings, I would say, with companies. The idea to me and the point with DIPA is also to try to have a democratization of these topics, because maybe I know about the DPP and all my colleagues know about DPP, but if I ask my family or my friends, they maybe never heard about that.
And none of us also knew about it. So thank you for educating us on that.
For me, thinking about DPP, I'm thinking, well, I will bore. It's maybe boring for people hearing it again and again, and this is why the book for me is it's not a technical book. It's simply a book to explain what is the DPP and how it could impact our life in a positive way. And I believe that we need more of this simply content creation.
I have a technical question for you.
Uh,
So, on the DPP, you just mentioned about the circular economy, and it is more so related on the forward integration. What about the backward integration, where the materials come from, where the raw products come from? How do you ensure that is clean as you want to make the forward integration clean? My question 1.B is, while you do that, you see most of the regulations which are there in the Europe, they also transpire in other parts of the world. How well do you see that large merchandise companies would adapt to something like that?
so complex. First question. The idea of a DPP is, as you say, for circularity, but it's also simply to understand and have more information on the product itself. So the information that you will get on the materials, on the substance, will also give you the opportunity to regulate and to be able, from the sourcing point of view, to decide to go or not go for this type of material. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's not only something that will give you a support for the circularity once the product is in the consumption cycle. The point to have a DPP is also thinking at the design stage. So I don't know if this is familiar to you, but 80% of an impact of a product is decided at the design stage. So at the design stage, with eco requirement, with eco design, you are supposed to select the most environmental friendly materials. You are supposed to make choices of safe substances. So the impact of the DPP to me will also totally be at the sourcing, at the first extraction phase of a product. It's simply not so much about the passport itself, but it's about simply having this transparency. Does that answer your question?
It kind of, but then the other question rises that cost versus benefit. You see
Uh,
that many fast fashion products are there in the market, and in the times that where the crunches are there, financial crunches are there across many parts of the world, where do you see majority of the people buying from? So I'm sure there would be a lot of complication, and you have a big job ahead to do. So as a,
exactly. This is a good news for DIPA, but you're raising all the right questions. The question of, you mentioned also before, what about the full chain, right? Are they ready to get this information? A lot of other countries that have are the first suppliers in the chain, they don't have even the infrastructure to get the DPP in place. So the point of having a regulation like that coming is simply starting to feel responsible about what we produce, starting to feel also obligated to say to the customers what is inside my product, which today, I mean, for food, maybe you know what is inside in terms of ingredients. If you buy tomorrow a car, if you buy a watch, you don't know exactly what, or a phone. So this is about this transparency, starting to get information. How we will get information, and the last point you raised is extremely important. Are these organizations happy and will they push for this? Most of the time, as you say, it's putting the spotlight on a lot of things that shouldn't be done. It's reducing or questioning our consumption patterns with how much we buy and the pace of, as you had as example, the fashion industry, for instance. So no, it will not be welcomed, and this is why it's not something, as you say, that will be an easy deployment, though the idea that we start thinking about it, and the the purpose of also writing books and writing content is that business might fight against it actually.
Yeah.
But consumers might see that on the long run, well, you know what? I would like to know what is in my product. I would like to know if it's safe substances. I would like to have companies helping me to decode what is inside, how I will give this product to a second life, because a lot of people in the end are really concerned and engaged in these topics.
It's a humongous job, and you have a lot to do in this field now. Now, as a parting question, your final message to all our viewers, and how do you see we can collaborate, or we could accelerate this movement in any way? We would be more than happy to collaborate on that.
The same, right now it's about simply, as you say, joining forces, right? I mean, this is what I allowed myself to do with this company creation, is simply deciding that I don't want to spend my time in emails and politics serving a company, but I want to serve 100% on my daily time on a topic that makes a lot of sense, and find people with the same purpose to co-write content that can have an impact. And something also that we mentioned with maybe female leadership is trying and being very persistent with something, right? If you believe in something, I think it's, personally, I was a very shy and introvert, I'm still introvert person, but when you find a topic that is bigger than yourself, I believe this is where women and, let's say, the diversity panel of personalities could, fight their own fears to become bigger than simply their own person. Because when I speak about these topics, I forget, my own fears, and because I really truly believe that this can have an impact and be something positive for others.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. And how can people get in touch with you in case they want to approach you? What is the best way for them?
I think in the same way that you did, that LinkedIn is a place where they can find my profile, or Deepa, and on deepa.eu, a very simple website. There's a contact form, so I'm always happy to have more of these type of discussions.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Marion. It was a pleasure talking to you and learning so much about the work that you're doing, and wishing you all the best for the book and the huge work that you have in front of you.